And now we're happy to hand over to someone who keynoted Troopers 12, like exactly 10 years ago. And he's a perfect match for the reunion. We're happy he's here. Please welcome Professor Dr. Gary McGraw.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not actually here, Dr. Professor, or whatever anymore, because I am retired. So I'll take off this, which I made in Troopers 2012. There are things you can make at this conference, which is really cool. I only wear this every 10 years, so I put it back away. And I'm retired. And now, this is what I'm doing. But in the meantime, let me tell you where I come from. So a long time ago, I wrote a bunch of books on software security. And so some of you may know me as a software security person, writing Building Secure Software and Software Security and Exploiting Software and Exploiting Online Games and a whole bunch of other stuff. And everything I tell you today is going to be informed by that work over 25 years of doing that software security work. I had a company called Cigital, which we grew up to about 500 people. The way that we did our work was very similar to the way these guys that run Troopers do their work. So philosophically, we felt very, very close to those guys. And we sold that company to Synopsys in 2016, which is when I became a retired guy. But in addition to that, I'm also a musician, and I live in a place called Virginia. Anybody ever heard of that Country Road song in here? Shall we all sing it? What do you think? Country Road. That's where I'm from. I live in that song, right on the Shenandoah River. And sometimes I have big fires there. You're all invited to the next one, every solstice. Later today at 5:30, I'm going to talk about this machine learning security stuff. I'll try to work some into the keynote this morning. But what I've been working on lately is what happens all the time in security if you've been in it for 30 years, like me. You see these waves of new things that are happening, unbelievable hype. Like, I remember when these things didn't really exist. Everybody didn't have one in their pocket. And all of us security people were like, wait, oh. And that happens every time. And now it's happening with machine learning. It's time to go, wait, oh. So we're ready for that, and I'll tell you more about that this afternoon. What I want to do today, though, is meet the challenge that I got from Michele, which is involving time travel. So exactly 10 years ago at Troopers 2012, I gave a talk, and the talk was about software security zombies. The reason it was zombies is because by that time in 2012, I'd already given that talk 200 times. And so you say the same thing, and yet the same thing still is right. We still have to repeat the obvious things. So I called them zombies. It's like, yes, pen testing alone is not enough. And so, you know, I couldn't really go back to the zombies. They all really still exist. But I thought, what have I learned in the last 10 years since the last Troopers that I can like bring to the table and say, hey guys, we all got to work on this together. And so what I did is I looked at all of the big talks I gave in the last 10 years, and I tried to take one thing out of each of those talks. Now I added up all of the things in all of those talks, and it was 41 things, which is a kind of cool number, but 42 is a way cooler number. So I added a bonus one, so it would be 42. And I'm going to tell you about just a few of those 42 things. In fact, I'll show you all 42, but I'm only going to tell you about one from each glob. So it's going to look something like this. There are 6 software security zombies, the ones that I talked about in 2012, that still exist. There are 10 design flaws in software, not bugs, but flaws. There are 7 common myths of software security. There are 7 startup lessons. So I did this startup and grew it up to 500 people. and I learned only 7 things. I'm going to tell you one of those. There are 4 tribes of CISOs. If you've ever seen CISOs, they're the people that gets fired when we have a security problem. So don't be the guy before the guy is the best advice I can give you. And then on top of that, 7 things that I learned in my career in IT. So I'm going to pick one thing out of each of those globs, which adds up to 42, and that's where this talk is coming from. So the first thing we got to do is run from the software security zombies. Here they are, and here is the slide. Remember when slides used to be like smooshed like that back in the old days? And there's the logo in low resolution. So here they are. Network security doesn't work for software security. The more code you have, the more bugs you have. You guys remember that? You think we have more code or less code now than we had in 2012? Anybody? More? How about bugs? More or less? More. In fact, now you throw a dart anywhere, you're going to hit a bug, right? We now know that you have to put stuff in the software development lifecycle. We now know that there are not just bugs, but architecture flaws. We now know that we can't just run negative tests and declare something secure. We can just say, at least we ran these tests against it. And the last one and the most important one I want to tell you now. This is a zombie baby. In 2012, we were all thinking about how do I find bugs in software? How do I automate that? What about using static analysis? Is it better to do dynamic black box testing? Should I do pen testing only? How do I find the bugs? You know, and we forgot about the more important thing, which is once you find it, you better fix it. Otherwise, all you did is just say, hey, I got a problem. I have 10,000 problems. So we still have got work to do in security, fixing things. I want to emphasize this. The only way to make a system secure, any kind of system, but especially software, is to think about security before you start writing the code. Not only at the design level, but also at the implementation level. So we have lots of work to do, both identifying problems, but more importantly, designing things right and fixing things when we find problems. So that is one of the most important things. And you got to ask yourself, well, which one of the 10,000 bugs should I fix first? And that's a really good question. Lots of work remains here. So anybody who thinks that we're done with software security, that we've built all the tools that we need, and now we just have to turn cranks, we still have to figure out which bugs to fix and how to fix them properly. More important than bugs, though, are flaws. And in fact, these 2 categories are something I've been trying to get people to understand for about 20 years. It's very difficult because it's easy to talk about bugs. When you look at code, you can say, oh, look, right there on line 42, I used the wrong system call in C. So I know that's going to lead to a buffer overflow, so I change that. I use a new system call. That's great. That's pretty easy because it's on line whatever, 4024, right there it is. Finding a design flaw is much harder. And so, you know, I want to really emphasize the fact that there are these 2 categories of things. So here are a list of bugs. These are common bugs that I'm sure you've heard of before: race conditions and buffer overflows, you know, unsafe system calls. These are all mostly C related. Here's a bunch of architecture flaws like screwing up crypto, compartmentalizing incorrectly. You know, so between bugs and flaws, a question for you. What do you think the division is if you had to divide it up in percentages? How many bugs versus how many flaws? Anybody have a guess? Yell something out, anybody. 80-20. 80 which way? Which way? Either way? 80 bugs, 20 flaws? 80 flaws, 20 bugs. Wrong. Anybody else? What? 50-50. Are you a mathematician? That's a really good guess. It turns out to be right. I've heard all sorts of different guesses. 90-10, you know, 10-90. Some people usually say when somebody says 80-20 and gets it wrong, they go, how about 20-80? But smart math guys go, yeah, 50-50, we'll just go right in the middle and we're probably going to be close. It turns out 50-50 is right. But my favorite answer of all time, many years ago, about 15, 17 years ago, I was giving this talk at Qualcomm, and I asked the same question, and somebody said, 70-70. And everybody moved away from that guy. Like, wow, that guy can't really do math very well. But you know what? That guy might have been right. There were 20% more on either side that we didn't even know about. However, the main point is this. There are design problems, and we've got to fix the design problems as much as we're fixing the bugs. We still got plenty of bugs to go, but we haven't even started on design. Like, how do you find design problems? Well, that's a good question. Nobody's really sure. But one thing that we did was gather together some practitioners in the IEEE to think about flaws the same way we think about bugs. I gave them an assignment when they all got together, and we built a thing called the Center for Secure Design. The idea was bring some design flaws from your own organization. And we had people from Google, and we had people from Facebook, we had people from Qualcomm. There were lots of people came and brought flaws. And I didn't even say, here's what a flaw looks like. Let's just find out what people think they are. And we all dumped them out on the floor in front of each other, real ones, and we started sorting them out into piles. We, over a few days, identified 10 big piles, which are up here. And then we said, look, we could say something like, trust is a problem. Be careful about trust. Or we could tell you how to do it better, how to avoid flaws by doing better design. And that's what we ended up doing in that piece of work. So these are 10 major flaws that have been found in the world a lot that we now know how to avoid, and I'll give you an example of one that's super important. It's about trust. Make sure that all the data that you eat come from a trusted place. And if they come from an untrusted place, don't eat it. Or at least wash it off before you eat it. Right? And assume that data are going to try to do something bad. So if you bring something in from the outside, put it in a box. These are design problems that are pretty obvious. So we have to worry about things like access control, policy enforcement, sensitive data in client code. All of these things are around trust as well and lead to problems. I want to give you an example of what happens when we don't do this obvious thing for machine learning. Machine learning is about creating a machine by taking data from the outside and adjusting the code, in real time through a training process, changing the way the machine is wired up over millions or sometimes billions of cycles to become the data. So the machine becomes the data. That's really interesting. Now, that means if you start with data that are evil, what do you end up with? A machine that's evil. And we don't really want to build evil machines, do we? No. Those of you who do, you're at the wrong conference. This is where we build the good machines, right? So we want to make sure that the data that we use that become the machine are properly accounted for, can't be poisoned. We got them from somebody we trust. We at least tried to clean things up. More about that later at 5:30. But I want to show you that each one of these flaws, which account for half of the defects in systems that we build, also applies to machine learning, just as well as it applies to software and hardware. Speaking of software, there are a whole bunch of myths associated with software security. And for RSA, which is a big show filled with more marketing people than actual technology people, I built this little stupid list. Because when you go to RSA, you have to do stupider things for the masses. And so here are 7 myths that turn out to be wrong, like you can just have broken apps as long as you have a firewall and your perimeter is secure. No, that's wrong. You know, all you need is a tool. Just run the tool and your code will magically become secure. No, that's wrong. Here's a hard one. Developers should do it. Then we don't have to do it. We'll let the developers do it. Have you seen the crap that developers produce? If you're the security guy, you can help them. They need to know how to think like a security person. Remember, developers are the most optimistic people on the whole planet. We come to the developers and we go, okay, we're going to build this thing. We're not really sure, but it's going to fly to the moon, and we got to put some code on there to control the thing flying to the moon, and that means it has to do a bunch of stuff. We haven't figured it out, but can you write that code? And the developers go, sure. That is optimistic. Optimistic people don't usually think about bad, you know. So I'll give you a really simple example. Imagine you have a program, you're supposed to take in a name. You have to account for German, so you have really long name, like maybe 1 megabyte. But then, it's Unicode, dude. So, but then somebody comes along and they put a terabyte in there, and I say to the developer, I'm going to put a terabyte in the name field. Then what? And the developer says, no, even German names are less than a megabyte. And you say, yeah, but what if I do put in a terabyte? They go, why would anybody ever do that? No one would ever do that. I'm the bad person. I do the bad thing on purpose. Remember the part about people rob banks? They're not supposed to do that, but they do it anyway. And they go, wow, people rob banks. That's bad. Yeah, imagine those people running your code. So we can't leave it only up to developers. We have to teach them how we think. And they have to teach us how to code properly. So we have something to learn from both from each other. But of all of these myths, I think my favorite one is this. It is that if I build a system and it's all done and I need to make it secure, then I just sprinkle on the magic crypto fairy dust and it becomes secure. That is wrong. Security is not a feature. Security is a property of a system. Just like safety and reliability, all of these ilities, security is one of those. So if our code is not dependable, it can't be secure. If it's not reliable, it can't be secure. Security is not a thing. And the main thing that you ask developers when you say, hey, what do you think security is? They're going to go SSL, TLS, something like that. Just crypted up, I don't know. That's what they think because, you know, we talked about it too much in security. We didn't talk about the goal. What the goal is a property. And so it's important that we remind ourselves that all the time. All right. So in addition to technical stuff, which I've worked on for many, many years, I also ran a company that went from, when I joined it, I was employee number 18, but I was actually the 7th real employee. We used to count dogs and sometimes goldfish to get the employee number up back in the early days. So I remember that. I joined as the 7th person, and when I left the company, we had 500 people. And now it's part of Synopsys, which has 15,000 people, something like that. And the security division has at least 1,000. So that's very, very interesting. You know, what happens when you build a startup from zero all the way through, we all do all the jobs together, that's amoeba mode, to, we're going to have to sort of differentiate between some jobs. We shouldn't send that guy to sales because he only talks about problems. We need to send that guy to engineering. And instead, we have the vision people go to sales or whatever. And then you get bigger, and pretty soon there's middle management at about 150 or 200, and you go, we're not even sure what that guy does. But he does a lot of it, enough for a full-time job. I think if you take some paper from here and you put it over there, that's middle management. And remember, middle management is mostly about inertia, because if you try to go too fast, You have to slow down. That's what middle management for. Or if you try to change direction wrong, it also keeps you from changing wrong. So it's like just an inertia machine. But it's an important inertia machine. So I learned some things while I was building this company, Cigital, up together with a lot of other people. And here are the things. The first thing is, don't forget to write stuff down and think. Turns out to be important. Build a network of people. You know why I'm here at Troopers 2022? Because I met people at 2012 that were so great that we've remained friends for a decade. So you can meet people here at this conference that may be your friends in 10 years still, and we'll all watch the world grow and change together. So as we reboot this conference and get it back on track after Corona, thanks for your help with that, by the way. Don't forget to do the networking part. The most important part of Troopers is not the keynote. The most important, well, maybe it is. Never mind. The most important part of Troopers is the hall track, or tonight at Packet Wars when everybody's had just a little too much beer and you start talking about real stuff through your mask, right? Or, outside having a coffee. So don't forget to do the hall track. What is the categorical imperative? Anybody know who Kant is in here? Immanuel Kant? Yeah. I think he was a German guy, wasn't he? Rule stickler. Treat other people like you want to be treated. That's all it is. Very simple thing. Now, the one I'm going to emphasize is calmness. I've watched some of this today. In fact, I have a picture I wish I could show you, but I don't have time to show it right now. But watching Flo and Michael working on this conference with the 5 trillion million things that happen, it's like they didn't change a few variables. Back in the past, for the last 15 years, it was just, we'll change a couple variables, same venue, we know how the Wi-Fi system works, same stuff. They changed all of the variables, every single one. New venue, new place, a lot of new people, new stuff, everything. It is hard to put on a conference that's this good. So let's give them a hand for being calm while all of that happened. Really, super job. This is way harder than you think. The fact that something's coming out when I talk into this is a thing. That's good. So, how do you do that? Well, in the face of adversity, you remain calm. You don't panic. And when you're running a company, that comes to numbers and money too. You have to make payroll for 500 families. You can't screw that up. It's a real commitment to your people. They have a commitment to you, you got a commitment to them. And one way to show that commitment is to share the actual results. You say, here's how much money we made, here's how we spent it, you have an open book. These are things that I think are important as you build something up. And that goes for engineering too. Here's what we've built so far, here are the problems, here's our productivity levels. These are not secrets. These are things we can use to build a better organization. So the more you share information inside of your organization, the better off you're going to be, I think. And measurement is the key to that. For example, there's this thing called EBITDA, which I don't know what the German equivalent is. It may be EBITDA. But a lot of technical people never even heard of that. And it's about earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. That's what it stands for. It's a bunch of just blah, 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 blah from accounting. But really what it is cash. So you just think cash. And if you look at where's the cash today, then you have a better idea about how your company's running than if you don't. And it's okay to share that with everybody as long as you're calm. If you go, oh my God, no cash, everyone's going to quit. Instead, you have to say, big hole, step to the left. Good. Now keep going. So that's the sort of thing that you do, that I learned over the years in terms of running a company. The next thing I want to do is move up even farther in the food chain in security. So there's some debate about whether this word should be CISO or CISO. What do you think? Germans, which one is it? Can't hear you. Don't. CISO? CISO? That's like halfway between. Flow. That's not helpful. Bruce Potter from ShmooCon, he thinks CISO, and he is one. I think CISO, I don't know, doesn't really matter. It's mainly the guy before the guy, as I said before. A lot of people, here's what it stands for: Chief Impending Sacrifice Officer. Here, hold this. Good CISO. I mean CISO, whatever. Yeah, because you have to stand on top of the whole security pile. It helps if there is one. Otherwise, you're just standing in thin air waiting to fall, like the coyote in Roadrunner. Here's the thing about CISOs. There are some. They do some stuff. But the people who talk about what CISOs do and write books about it, they're not CISOs. They're just marketing people or people from Gartner who don't know anything. And so when I went to find out what CISOs do, I read all that stuff. I was like, this is just garbage. This is not what they really do. If some of my friends are those, maybe I'll just ask those guys what they actually do and write it down. Now, you may remember this thing called the BSIM, which still exists, that I talked about in 2012. Now it's quite a huge thing for software security. And the idea behind the CISO work and the BSIM was very much the same. Let's go out into the world and find out what's actually happening. We'll gather some data. We'll look at the data and go, shit. We'll reorganize it until we understand it. And then we'll say, here's what we found out by going into the real world and, looking at what happened. So we did that for CISOs. It was hard. First, I called up 25 of my friends that were actually CISOs that were very good. The CISO of Bank of America, CISO who's now the CISO of Google, was at Goldman Sachs at the time, and said, guys, doing this project, they're like, ooh, we like that. We love the BSIM. We would love to know what we're supposed to do. I want to know what that guy's doing and that guy. I said, all right, I'll talk to all those guys and we'll just put it all together. So we gathered all this data and we said, oh, this is too hard. Usually the obvious answer just emerges out of the data. At least that's how my brain usually works. For this one, it didn't work. So I talked to a guy named Brian Chess, also a scientist who is now at Oracle. Oh, God, I don't know how a scientist works there. But so he's the CISO of the NetSuite thing. And he loves hard problems. And I said, I have all this data and I can't figure it out. And he said, do you still have lots of bourbon? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right, I'll fly to Virginia. And we'll sit in the guest house and we'll just work this out. And after 4 days of smashing the data, we came up with these 4 tribes. 4 different kinds of CISOs. They go from good to not so good. At the bottom, we have security, where we dump $10, or I guess that's about 10.5 euros, right? So 10.11. So we dump in 10 euros into security and they just cost us money. Next year we might do 11, maybe we'll do 9. But it's just about how much money we dump in the hole. That's the bottom. At the top, we have the most important tribe that I want to tell you about. And that is people that are real security people like us who can also be a business person at the table talking about profit and loss, talking about how they're enabling everybody else to make more money. This doesn't say security division makes money. It's not really supposed to. It's supposed to help everybody else make more money. And if you're a CISO who thinks about it that way, I'm not here to slow you down. I'm here to speed you up and make sure you don't fly off the edge of the world. That's the way to do it. So these are people who know things like, I'll tell you a lesson that was very interesting. The US government was beginning to think about doing some standards and requirements for security for businesses at the CISO level. And the NSA was involved in this, and the NSA was beginning to put some information into the system and moving the regulations in a certain direction, which was very interesting. And my friend Phil Venables, who's now the CISO of Alphabet on top of Google, said, dang, those NSA guys, actually he said it in a British accent, but let's pretend, dang, those NSA guys. So they were going to impose some stuff. And instead of saying, what are they going to do? He said, I know, I'll go get on the board of the NSA, which is what he did. That's getting in front of the regulations. So you can either be a leader and an enabler and get in front of the problems, or you can just follow and try to play catch up. It's better to do that. So that's another one of the things out of the 42 things that I wanted to share today. Finally, I started getting older. And so about the time I retired was 2019, right before Corona, actually. I started thinking about what I learned over all these years, not just technical stuff like things about bugs and flaws and buffer overflows from the early part of the talk, and not just business hoo-ha like the CISO stuff, but life. Is it good to be a technology person out in the world for 21 years? What do you learn when you do that? Well, these are the things that I learned, and I hung these off of the work of two people that I have a lot of respect for. I think of them as kind of people I'd like to be like. And, it would be lucky if I were. One is Frank Zappa. Anybody ever heard of Frank Zappa in here? Oh, it's okay to clap for Frank. Yes. And the other is a guy named T.C. Boyle, who writes, he's an American novelist, but all of his books are published in German too, because his wife is German, Frau B, we call her. And he's a really interesting writer. So if you haven't read any stuff from Boyle, read his stuff. So based on these two guys, these are the lessons that I tried to write down. Number one, you should actually give a shit. Number two, you have to give a shit every day, a lot, the same. You have to give the same talk 500 times. That's what you have to do. Number three, don't forget to practice. I got to tell you, I've only given 2 live talks since Corona, only 2. And I loved it because the energy comes back to you. I feel energy from you guys, paying attention and laughing and, booing. Let's hear you boo. Boo, boo. Yeah, so much energy. It's hard to remember how to give a talk when you're talking to a screen full of eggs that have their video off. That sucks. And people are like, wow, that was a great talk you gave on Zoom. And you go, I wouldn't fucking know. I was just, sitting in front of my screen. Number 4, sometimes you invent stuff that nobody else invented and everyone's going to tell you, you can't do that. You know what you tell them? Can so. Okay to do original things. It turns out that security, in my view, is about design and software problems. It's not about network packets. The network packet stuff, that's all written in software. You want to see some screwed up stuff like, I don't know, IPv6, just look at the design. Number 5 we already talked about, be calm. Number 6 is coming up soon. And number 7, know your audience. Interesting to try to remember what the Troopers audience is like, but this is a great audience. It's fun to talk to you guys. The coolest thing about Troopers is the give back thing. Give back. You know that part about the charity? Well, instead of giving speakers money to give a talk, which is what the rest of the world usually does, the way it worked is Troopers 12, they said, hey, we'll give $1,500 to your favorite charity, which is, a real chunk of change. That's pretty cool. So what I said was, I'm going to put that into this thing called Kiva that does microloans. And I started using Kiva with a little tiny seed from Troopers of $1,500. Eventually that became $6,000. Which got put in. But the first 1,500 came from Troopers, and the idea came from Troopers. So thank you for that. And to date, that money has turned itself into $45,800 because of Troopers. Microloans to people who do capitalism at a tiny little scale, which I think is okay. I don't really like surveillance capitalism much, but I do kind of like capitalism. And so if we can help people that don't have any by giving them a loan and then they pay it back over time and it's only $25, it changes their lives. That's what Kiva does. So we want to change lives that way. Thanks, Troopers, for the seed. That's what it became. You can do that too. Thanks. Do it here. Give back. It doesn't have to be money. If you learn something, share what you learned with others. Don't hoard it. Don't try to be the best. Try to be the guy who tells everybody how to do that. Remember, we are all monkeys, this is from Boyle, on this planet together. We're the same monkeys. And some monkeys wear ties and stuff. They think they're better monkeys, but they're not. Us monkeys with no ties, we're the good monkeys. But we're all monkeys, right? So thanks for Troopers for that. So, I've given you a fair chunk of stuff to digest. And I want to tell you that there are kind of places to go look for each one of these things that I talked about. So I pulled one lesson out of all those. There were 41 things in that list. The zombies, the Center for Secure Design flaws, the 7 myths of software security, including crypto fairy dust, stuff we learned about startup lessons, the CISO report, the Zappa and Boyle talk that I gave at ShmooCon, and finally, Kiva. If you want to join in onto the Kiva thing, you can do that too. There are the URLs for all that stuff. Check that out at your leisure. If you have any trouble getting to that, you can just get in touch with me easily by this. So here's my contact information. Feel free to pop me an email, hit me up on Twitter. I care about this field and what we're doing, and I really jumped at the opportunity to be back at Troopers in 2022, so I will see you in 2032. Have a good conference.
So, thank you so much, man.
My pleasure.
So good to have you.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gary. And even though we are already out of schedule, of course, we want to give you room for a few questions. So if you could maybe get a little more light.
How you want to do questions?
For the audience? Yeah, I would like it. You need your laptop for questions?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I don't actually know it.
You're going to look the answer up?
I'm going to look it up.
Okay. So even though I can hardly see you, now it's getting better. Oh, but it's, yeah.
There's some light.
So, do we have any questions to Gary?
Come on, don't be shy.
Yeah.
Come on.
We know we haven't met people, real meeting in person for quite a while, but try. Yeah. No. I thought that
everybody's raising their hand on Zoom. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Don't hit the button. Raise the hand for real. Yeah. So, okay, maybe everyone is like hungry.
You ask a question.
I'm asking a question.
Yeah.
Okay, Flo, do you have a question? Yeah, can you just...
There's one. It only takes one guy to start, and then everybody has questions. Turn on the other mic, the roving mic.
Hello.
It's supposed to be on. Turn the power button on.
Switched on?
Okay, I think that's a mask. My question is, it's 10 years after the initial keynote. Is it better now or is it worse?
What is it?
Security.
Global pandemic's pretty bad.
Yeah, but security by design and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Is it a progress or is it getting better?
We've made an absolute ton of progress in software security. So 10 years ago, when what's sometimes called application security was very young, we had to convince people that it was a problem. Now I think most people know. 10 years ago, well, okay. So I do think we've made a lot of progress, especially if you use the main metric for security, which is how much money did we spend on it. That's always going up, and so is the problem. It's a perfect correlation. I'm optimistic, so I will tell you this. After working in security for 25 years or maybe more, a lot of people get jaded and they get negative and they think, we'll never solve any of these problems. But I actually am optimistic. I think we've made lots of progress. I think we've learned a bunch of things, and we're doing a better job with security than we were 10 years ago. So hopefully that answers your question. Yep. Somebody ask a hard question.
So, yeah, another question.
I'll start at the back, because that's the longest way.
There he goes. Flo's running away.
Yes.
Here we go.
I was just curious, what exactly was the 40-second thing that you've learned?
What was the 40-second thing?
Yes.
It was all those details. This. That's number 42.
Can you raise your hands again, please? Because my memory is shit.
There's
There was
right
one here at the front.
Yeah. Wow, this is fun.
No, it's not.
Now the next one we want way back
Hello.
there.
So, what is the state of machine learning and artificial intelligence in security
Ah.
from your standpoint?
Okay,
You said
so
something
I forgot to plug my own talk. So at 5:30 in this very room, I'm going to talk about what I've been doing for the last 3 years in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it's going to be for people who aren't really machine learning people, but who do know a lot about security. So, you know, I'll tell you the main thing, though, for everybody. Here's what I learned. Not much has changed in machine learning in 20 years. If you knew what was going on a long time ago, even in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was working on it actively as a grad student, you'll be surprised to find out that all the things we're working on now with deep neural networks, for example, and convolutional learning, all of these auto-associated predictive generators, all of these things are the same technology that we had a long time ago. What's changed is computers are way, way faster, lots more cycles laying around to do stuff, and data sets are immense, way, way bigger. So more data plus more cycles plus the same old stuff from 20 years ago means we've made a lot of progress in machine learning. But like normal, the people that are working on the edge are not thinking about security. They're thinking about how to make the damn thing work. Like they're banging on it and changing parameters, and you know, even the people publishing papers, they say stuff like, we set this parameter empirically to 6. And you know what that means is, we screwed around until 6 worked, so 6. But that's the answer. If you want to hear more about that, 5:30 this room.
More questions?
This guy over here had one. Yeah?
Oh, fuck.
Hi, I'm Henrik, and I would like to ask, it seems that we have a growing interconnection of things, and that's a bad thing because a lot of things getting interconnected is not very secure.
Yes.
Do you think we will reach like a peak and then people will understand that it's bad and it will go less connected in the future?
No. Let me add one more thing. A long time ago, I identified what I called the Trinity of Trouble. Trinity of Trouble is what we wrote about in Exploiting Software. Gosh, I think that was 2008 maybe, I can't remember. And the 3 things, one of them was that, connectedness. Number 2, extensibility. You know, I made it a virtual machine so I can run code on top of it. It's a Turing machine now. Yep. So we're not going to turn off any of those things. It's like Pandora's box. As soon as you open it, whoop, out everything goes. It's better to just say 9.
Oh, thank you so much for the first row.
Somebody back here think of a question. Yeah.
I was wondering that this centralization of the all the softwares that are running on the public cloud, what kind of an effects it has on the security, what we currently facing? Yeah, thank you.
Let me ask you the question. This is the question that was asked 25 years ago. So we have this old code that we were running on this rack, and you know, and we rack 4, and it's all very secure and stuff. But now we're going to connect it to the internet. You think it's going to be okay? And the answer was, no, man, you just connected it. And now all we're saying is, well, the thing you connected it to, instead of having that in your room, it's in somebody else's room. In fact, you don't even own it, they do. Oh, so it's the same as connecting it to the net. You know, I really don't think there's very much difference in having your own on-prem cloud and having a public cloud, except for this. The people who run the cloud at AWS and who run the cloud at DigitalOcean or who run the cloud at Google are better IT people than your IT people. They're better. So they might configure it better, but you still have to use it properly. Fair enough? Yeah, remember, a distributed system is a system in which a computer you didn't even know existed can screw up your whole day. Any more, or are we done? What do you think? 3, 2, 1, see you later.
Thank you.